Welcome to the 30-Minute Hour. It's the personal development podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. There's some background noise going there.
I hear some tape.
Also joining me, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday. How do I sound?
All right.
Got a new mic.
Got a new microphone. Fantastic.
Serious now. I got my glasses a couple weeks ago. Got a mic. Serious now.
Fantastic. All right. You are official.
Got a mic.
After 185 episodes.
That's right. That's right.
There we go. Good stuff. So yeah, we're excited about today's episode. We're going to be talking about the 7 essential stories charismatic leaders tell. So this is definitely one you want to lean into. It'll help to amp up your influence and help you to really have those conversations that tell the right stories to persuade people to make certain decisions. But before we go there, you need to know that this is not your everyday podcast. That's right. We do things a little differently around here. And I know we got quite a few people watching us live. You can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on LinkedIn. You can watch us on Facebook by going to the 30-Minute Hour. Just type in the 30-Minute Hour podcast in those search engines, and there you will find us. As you know, this morning we did Thank God It's Monday, and we talked about becoming undeniable. That's definitely one you want to go back and check out. Give yourself your short weekly dose of inspiration. How to become undeniable, becoming undeniable. Make sure you check it out. Also, you need to know that on this coming Saturday, we've got our special coffee and conversation episode. That's where the members of the What Now movement get together and we talk about these topics to help to inspire you. This particular Saturday, we're going to talk about how to slow down so you can speed up. So definitely make sure you check that out. More details coming out on that, but that's going to be this coming Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. All right. So now let's get to it. The 7 essential stories charismatic leaders tell. Again, that's the theme of our episode today. And our guest, he's the founder of the sales and marketing strategy firm, StrategyPeak Sales and Marketing Advisors. He's a 27-year veteran of the sales and marketing industry. He's the author of the Amazon bestseller, The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. And it details how anyone can move people and mountains with the power of story. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-Minute Hour podcast, Kurian Matthew Tharakan.
Eric, Ted, thanks for having me on. My first in Clinton, Maryland.
That's
My
right.
sister lives just a few blocks away from me down in Ellicott, so I've been down there before.
All right.
Fantastic. Welcome to the show. We appreciate the fact that you're joining us all the way from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
All the way up here, the Great White North. Here we are. It's summer weather up here, though. It's the middle of end of August.
All right. Fantastic. So I do want to give people the backstory perspective. So back when you were attending the University of Alberta School of Business, what was your vision for your career at that time?
Well, at the time, I was pretty confident I'd be going into the computer business. You know, this is the days of Apple and IBM, and I used to work in computer land, while I was going through university and things like that. But yeah, it never worked out that way. Instead, I ended up going straight to sales, and it was just a natural fit, glove fit, hand fit, right? So it's been there for the last 35, 40 years now.
Fantastic. So it's interesting. Like most people don't have a clear vision for what they want to do at that time, but then after trial and error, that's when they figure it out. So it's like if you could go back and talk to that younger version of yourself, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give?
Well, the primary thing is a lot of background noise, Eric. I don't know if you're hearing this or not, right?
Yeah,
It's Ted. Is Ted making all that background noise?
Yeah, but I think it's Ted.
Yes, it was. He just muted his mic, and the background noise went away.
Suddenly it stopped.
Thanks for doing that, Ted. All right. So I know how podcast audio quality has to be super good, right? Yeah. So the question was, what advice would I give my 20-year-old self?
Yes.
I've thought about this a lot, and I've given this answer a couple of times, more than a couple of times. And, back in your 20s, you're trying to game the system. You're trying to make things, as right as can be, make the right decision for the right place, the right time, get ahead, right? Strategies, tactics, and all that kind of stuff. And it usually doesn't work out the way you thought it would. You end up in a different place than you thought you might end up. And, most people wake up in their 30s and their 40s and think, hey, well, you know what? I'm here. I don't know how I got here. There was a plan, but it's not a straight line. It's a lot of zigs and zags. So the advice I'd give my 20-year self today, and I'm in my late 50s today, is everything is going to be okay. So stop trying to game the system, and just flow with what's in front of you. Have intention, but let the actual current of the river carry you forward, right? Don't fight the river. It'll drown you. It will drown you.
Yeah, so I think sometimes the challenge is we want to have it all figured out in every step. And sometimes you just have to, like you said, you just trust that everything's going to work out and focus on what's directly in front of you. So you're the founder of the sales and marketing strategy firm, StrategyPeak Sales and Marketing StrategyPeak Sales and Marketing Advisors. What was it that inspired you to start this company?
Well, it was like a lot of things. It's an opportunity at the moment. When I first got out of university, I always thought I wanted to be a consultant, and not knowing what that meant, what that involved, anything like that, and not realizing I had no experience to be a consultant. I'm 22 years old, right? And eventually got to the point where I had enough experience under my belt, and the opportunity presented itself. I had just left a position, and I leapt into, and I had some clients, and I leapt into just going on my own, right? That was probably about 13 years ago, something like that. And I haven't looked back since then. And I've gotten myself involved in a number of other things in the meantime. But that particular thing, and the funny part of it is that I always thought I wanted to be a consultant. And here I am as a consultant. And, it's not nearly as glorious as I thought it was going to be. It's not nearly as exciting as I thought it was going to be. And certainly, it's like a regular job, and there's ups and downs, and, and at least you're autonomous for the most part. You still report to a client. That's your boss, right? You don't report to a boss and then a client. So that's always good. But, it is completely not the same kind of celebrity stardom that I thought it was going to be when I was 22. Do not become a consultant, kids, if you want celebrity stardom. It's not here.
So that's interesting when you look at the consulting, like what was it when you were looking at it before that led you to believe it was like a celebrity stardom thing?
Well, I think what the appealing part was that, you'd come in, analyze the problem, come up with some brilliant strategy for execution, and they'd pay you high dollars of money to do that, to take that advice and then laud you for the privilege of hearing your innate and stellar wisdom. And between all those things, that's sort of a celebrity type of stage, starstruck type of thing, right? And of course, the three of us have some aspect of consulting that we're doing, in one way or the other. And that certainly isn't the case on a day-to-day basis whatsoever. It might be the opposite of that a lot of times.
Right, because I've done a lot of consulting, and I never remember it feeling like it was a celebrity factor.
Well, I do a lot of speaking, and when you're on stage and things like that, and it can do that, or it can be a nerve-wracking experience as well, right? But Yeah, it's not always guaranteed. And, the more cocksure you are about, this is going to be an absolute slam dunk, that's when the knives come out to get you, right? And the audience hates you. And, the universe rewards persistence, but it also punishes the stupid.
It's true.
It's true.
The universe punishes the stupid. That's a tweetable quote there.
Yeah, they are plenty, and we're all capable of that level of arrogance. And we're going to blow this out of the water, no problem. And that's when you got to be the most scared, and when you have that kind of arrogance.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So who is your target audience for your company, and then how specifically do you help them?
So in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of work with the university startups, so technology startups of various kinds. And these are engineers and scientists, PhDs of various kinds, masters in science. They went to school to study molecular biology or engineering or things like that. They didn't go to school to learn to sell. Yet they find themselves in a position where they have to sell in order to move their ideas forward, attract investment dollars, get their first customer. Right. So those are my primary targets, is that I come in and I help them understand what they're selling and who they're selling to and why people are buying. My classic line is, most people can tell me what they're selling, but much fewer can tell me why their customers are buying. And so they don't take the time to get into the deep motives that people have when they're buying the product. Motives for assuaging pain, getting to gain, social motives, emotional motives of various kinds. There's all sorts of different reasons. They haven't gone to that level. It's more or less, when it comes to brand new entrepreneurs of any stripe, actually, it doesn't have to be engineers or scientists. It's, here's the product. Want to buy it? And of course, you just can't do that. And right now, I'm involved in, I'm a partner in a digital marketing company as well, outside of StrategyPeak. We got about 25 people there. We teach brand new merchants how to market on Shopify. It's a company called Socialite Communications. The learning platform is called Merchant Mastery. And, we spend so much time talking about hooks and big ideas and understanding the customer avatar and really getting into that deep angst, pain, desire for gain to embed that narrative in the product story, so that people can see on the instant why they should buy it. It is an instantaneous emotional response. And most people, when they go out the first time, they don't think in that way. They think of, hey, here's the product. You want to buy it? And that's not going to work anymore.
So do you find that people, they just don't really understand what it is they're really selling?
I think at the very beginning, most people don't. I certainly didn't. And I have a business degree, and they didn't teach me how to sell in my business degree. That's kind of silly when you think about it. Because until you sell something, you don't have, you need to sell something to a customer. That's the only way a business can operate. You need to have a customer. How do you get a customer? You have to sell the customer into the relationship, okay, by offering them some value in a product, whatever it is, right? And so I certainly didn't know anything about that at the age of 22. And my knowledge of how that's done today, in my late 50s, is night and day difference than it was 10 years ago. It's 20 years ago when I started, 30 years ago when I started in sales, very tactical, super tactical. Today, it's very narrative oriented, because that's how you evoke the emotional attraction to the product or service. And then the narrative, positions against the competition and creates all the value propositions to embed emotionally in people's heads so that that natural attraction can take place.
Yeah, so I think from my experience, a lot of times, you have your features and your benefits, right? Any product. But I think some of the people newer in sales, they're so focused on the features of the product instead of what's in it for the customer. How is this going to make the customer's life better?
Right. And even if they get to that point, they would focus on the functional aspects of the product, right? When you have to have at least 3 axes, if not more, to really make an impact: function, process, and relationship. And you have to have an emotional embedding in all of those. So function, what can I do? What will this product do for you? Product or service. Process is how will it do it? And relationship is who is behind the product and service and who's going to be doing it with me. It's those three things, and those three things are the critical ones. And beyond that, there's so many other things that are part of it. Can I get status out of this? Can I get an absence of fear? Can I get an advance in my ability to think of myself as wealthy? Not even whether I have wealth, but whether I can think of myself as wealthy. And you got all these different things that you would have and all the various axes in this mind, trying to perceive the value in the product you're showing me. Now, wouldn't it be easier if I just did a paint by numbers for you instead of the customer trying to figure it out all by themselves? And that's where the real power of a strategic narrative will lie.
So let's talk about the theme of this show is about the story, and talk about why you feel like stories are so critical to sales success.
Well, stories are the only way anybody understands their world. It is the only way. If you think about anything that you want to communicate to me, you can communicate it to me in a very functional manner. But it's until you put it into story form that I truly understand it. Because even if you tell me a function, then I have to project forward and say, how am I going to use it? Which becomes a story. If I'm not actually using it, it becomes a story. After I use it, it becomes a story. And the only way we understand our world, the only way I can understand you two guys, the only way I can understand my place in this universe of activity is through the stories that I tell. And in fact, this entire thing is, if you look into Wikipedia, it's called narrative identity. Narrative identity. And it goes through all these different types of frames of how people tell stories about themselves, their world, and their position within it.
Yeah, and one thing I know just from the speaking world, one of the things, the stories are memorable. I mean, I know I've done speaking engagements, and I'll see somebody several years later, and they'll remember one of the opening stories I used. So I mean, that's a huge takeaway, just to really get in the habit of really framing everything with a story.
Well, modern humans, all the different human instances that came out of Africa, 2 million years ago, 3 million years, 2 million years ago, you developed fire. You not developed fire, you discovered fire, how to control fire specifically, right? About 30,000 years ago, they started doing cave paintings and such. About 5,000 years ago, they put it into actual written story form. And all along all that way, what were they doing? They were around fire pits, telling each other stories. Stay away from that pond over there at night. The crocodiles come out. You have all these different types of things. Excuse me, my allergies are killing me. Give me a second. Okay, so stay away from that pond. And you got all these different types of things. And, you are communicating not only strategies, but you're also communicating entertainment. You're communicating morals, communicating values. And that's how you embed all of these things in people's heads.
Yeah, and I think some of it, too, is I think people resist you just telling them certain things anyway, right? There's a certain resistance. But I think if you frame it as a part of a story, it's a little more acceptable.
It's not only acceptable, it's relatable.
There you go.
Right? It's relatable, it's resonant, it's memorable. You got all these different types of things. And that's how people go forward with the ideas to make sense of their lives.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. So your book is titled The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. That's the theme of the show. So how did you come up with this idea that there's 7 stories that, you have these charismatic leaders, and we found that they tell these 7 specific stories? Like, how did you arrive at 7?
I counted, through the Bible and through all the different stories that people were saying. In fact, religion is one of the most powerful forms of inculcation, right? Most powerful forms of being able to get people to do what you want them to do. Education, religion is part of that. And if you take a look at that, there's about 7 basic stories that every major religion teaches its people. Would you like to hear what they are?
Absolutely.
First one, creation and origin. How did things start? 2, our identity, beliefs, and values. What are our highest order principles? What do we value the most in life? Who are we as people? 3, the big idea. What is the central organizing principle that all of this is around? 4 is the enemy we face. What do we fight for? What do we fight against? The mighty wins is story number 5. It's all about the things that are in the macro environment that propel our ship forward, our movement forward, our people forward. And these are things that are, societal, technological, economic, environmental, political, legislative things that are all either you're on trend or off trend. If you're off trend, you got a big problem. Number 6 is the journey we must undertake. And if this is all true, the first 5 stories are the left side of the equation. And if all those stories are true, then it says, then this is what you must do. So this is the journey we have to go on. And the final story is number 7, is why we will win. And so what it does is it combines the previous 6 stories in a single telling, right? Short single telling, but then adds what we call keystone elements. And keystone elements guarantee the win for your people. And so common keystones are superior God. Our God is better. Superior technology, superior people, superior strategy, superior environment. It could be all sorts of different things, but these keystones, there's hundreds of them that will give your people the win.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So what, like for entrepreneurs, is there one or two of those that you find to be most effective?
Well, the big idea has to be there. What is the central organizing principle that's going to transform your customer's life from where they are today to where they want to go? So you have to have the big idea story. But you might also want to toss in the enemy we face and the mighty wins. And so now the more stories you can tell, the more resonant your narrative becomes in people's heads, because people are used to these 7 stories. You cannot tell the entire story of the Bible or the Quran, okay, or the Torah without telling all 7 stories. Something would be missing. You can't tell all about what is it, and all 3 of those are Abrahamic religions. Okay, they go into the father Abraham, right? But they have a start, they have a beginning, they have an end, they have people that they fight. The devil or the Philistines. It could be a lot of different things, right? And all of these things come together to form the entirety of the universe of that story. It's a storyplex. And these stories reinforce each other. They can be standalone, but they also now strengthen the overall narrative, the meta narrative, so that it is resonant in people's heads. Now, Christianity is a little over 2,000 years old now. And, and at the very beginning, it was just a band of nuts, zealots, just crazy people, right? Battling the Romans and fighting against the established Jewish hierarchy, because it was an offshoot of Judaism. And it has subsequently become the world's biggest religion. There's 2.1 billion Christians in the world. There are 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. And the Muslims, the religion of Islam only came about in the 600s. The 7th century. The Prophet only came about in the 600s. And so that is now the second largest religion. And the Jews, where both these religions, took a lot of its initial start from, there's still only 14 million worldwide. There are only 14 million Jews, practicing Jews worldwide. How is that possible? And beyond that, there are literally thousands of religions, and human civilization has perhaps been around now for 10,000, 12,000 years. Writing has been around for about 5,000. And in that time, there have been thousands, absolutely thousands of religions that are gone, or so small, they are almost inconsequential. Where did they all go? Why did these ones survive? And my premise is that the 3 dominant religions that people think of as most, right, have the most powerful stories. Now, Hinduism has much more. The Hindus have much more people than the Jews do. The Judaism, practicing Jews, but they have very vibrant stories as well. The Hindus do. In the Bhagavad Gita, right? You got all these different types of things. Powerful stories. That's what creates the tent to be overflowing of people who want to be there, because the story is so resonant.
That's interesting. So, okay, so we've got some entrepreneurs that are watching us now, and they're saying, you know what? I hear this about stories. That's a great idea, but I don't have any stories to tell. What's your advice for that person who feels like they don't have a bank of stories?
Okay, Eric, stop lying to me. Stop lying to me. You tell stories all day long. Every day you tell stories, you understand stories, you create stories, because that's the only way you understand your world. Now, there's a creation story between Ted and you. Why is this podcast happening? There's a reason for it. And Eric's might be different than Ted's, but there's probably commonality here as well. What Eric wants to get out of the podcast may be different than what Ted does. But everybody is telling themselves stories all day long. All I'm going to do is download it from your brain by asking some very key questions.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one of the things that I had to get in the habit of as a speaker was just starting a story file, right?
Yeah.
So I just always had my antenna up. And so there were certain things that would happen that normally I wouldn't pay attention to, but hey, that's a story that could really tie back at some point. So I think that one of the key takeaways from this episode is that there's stories all around us, and we just need to be.
Story is the only thing there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cannot exist as a human being without being in either somebody else's story or creating the stories yourself. You have to. It is the only way we communicate. There is no other way to communicate.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned earlier the origin story.
The origin story, yeah, creation.
I think that's powerful. Like if you're a CEO, if you're able to tell, okay, this is the origin of the business. This is how we got to this point. This is how I got to this point of where I am. Talk more about that.
Well, the creation origin story always probably starts with an inciting incident. Every story needs an inciting incident. And so you go through and say, well, at that moment, I realized I couldn't stay here. At that moment, I realized there's a huge opportunity. At that moment, I realized whatever it is that you realized at that point. And it was that triggering moment, that inciting incident, that is the start of your creation story. Everybody has one of these. Every company has one. Every individual has one. And in large part, that is where your first identity comes from, either as a company or as an individual. Yeah. Still lots of background noise here.
Yeah, hang on. Let me see if I can adjust this here.
There we go. That's much better.
All right. So definitely we're talking to Kurian Tharakan. He's talking about the different types of stories. So, let's talk more about your book. Obviously, which is the same as the title of this episode, The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Like how does your book help people to become better storytellers?
Well, they realize that they can be very persuasive people by telling stories. And so I don't teach people sales skills anymore. I teach people story skills, because stories can do the heavy lifting of persuasion for you. Tell a powerful story, and you have the proper structure and the proper plot lines and the proper characters to get people to envision themselves in the end result, which is consuming a product or getting. Your product is actually something. It's not really a product. You know what it is? It's the following. Your customer is actually the hero of your story that you tell about your company. So what that makes you, and your customer is in some kind of pain, or they want to get to some kind of gain, and they have their own identity story, the creation story and such. But they are the hero of the story that you enable. So they're the hero of the story that you enable. And what that simply means is that makes you the wise wizard, the fairy godmother. And that makes your products the magic sword, the magic lantern, the magic incantation to enable the promise of your story to come alive for your customer. Right? So that's what it's about, because the product allows your customer to get to the transformation promised land. That's what your product does. The product itself is a path. It is a magic tool to get them to that end state. So when you tell these stories, you allow them to see the entirety of how it fits to enabling them to get to that end state.
That's awesome. So what are your thoughts about vulnerability when you're telling stories, telling personal stories of your struggles, your pain, your past setbacks?
The more authentic you are, the more trustable you become. No one wants to listen. Very few people want to listen to an arrogant bastard. Right? It's not high on the top of their list, right? But the more vulnerable you are, the more relevant you become, the more realistic you become, the more believable you become. And one of the things I did right at the very beginning of this, and I absolutely believed what I told you, but I think if you ask your audience, they would say that made him more believable at that point. And that was that I said, what I envisioned being a consultant at the age of 22 is completely different. There's certainly no celebrity factor to becoming a consultant, right? And it is the naivety and the arrogance of a 22-year-old kid not knowing what that all meant and what it takes to get there and actually deliver value for a client. That's the gap that creates the vulnerability in that story I said, right? And that's what would make me more relatable at that point. So I think vulnerability is a big part of it. People are vulnerable, period. There is something in their armor that there's a hole in their armor. There's a chink in their armor of some kind, right? And whether they choose to cover that up or whether they choose to display it, because they own it. Then they own that vulnerability. That's what creates that relatability.
Great. That's awesome. So Ted is great at telling these personal stories about business and the entrepreneur space. And, again, I think similar to the consulting thing, just being an entrepreneur, a lot of people come into it with rose-colored glasses, and Ted has his different personal. Speak to that, Ted. I know you share a lot of your personal experiences and stories to people.
Yeah, well, and being an entrepreneur, and it's always you're going to have your experiences, right? And it's how you're able to kind of make things happen, make the magic happen, right? And so it's always some stories kind of behind that on how you do what you do. Like one of the things that I often talk about with my team, we're looking at an opportunity, and someone will say, "We don't have past performance in that type of work. We've never done that before." And then I'll say, when I started, I didn't have past performance in anything, right? So, this is not the first time I've been up against something that we haven't done before, and those types of stories and how you deal with these types of situations, when things are not just laid out perfectly for you, those are things that I think help other people because they just figure, you just got all the answers. No, we just have to figure it out one way or the other. So.
No, I think that's a great example. So yeah, look, we did it before. And I have an example of a story where I've done it before without past performance. So why can't we do this now? So I think that's excellent. So what's next on the horizon for you?
Well, I'm writing a second book right now. It's called Leadership Parables. And so the first book gives you a framework for how to tell strategic narratives. So leaders, how to create a strategic narrative, how to tell a strategic narrative. So the second book now is a whole bunch of leadership principles in short story form. And sometimes the short story is like one paragraph. And sometimes it's like, 10 paragraphs, right? But it never goes more than 2 pages ever. And most are done on a single page. So we're going to have about 101 short stories there. Just finished writing my 65th. So another 36 to go, and we'll get that out the door as well.
Fantastic. So we're talking about leaders, and we're talking about the 7 essential stories that charismatic leaders tell. But I don't want to assume that everybody really has a picture of what a charismatic leader looks like. So for you, Kurian, what is a charismatic leader?
A charismatic leader is not one, hey, look at me. Look how great I am.
I'm charismatic.
Praise me. No, that's not what a charismatic leader is. A charismatic leader is actually the opposite of that. A charismatic leader gets his audience to come alive. to believe in themselves, to understand where they're going, to have that high energy state from wherever they were today to where they have to be in order to join this leader on that journey. Whether it's, and if it's Tony Robbins, it's just a challenge to be your own self. If it's Moses, is follow me out of Egypt. All right, you have to be a charismatic leader. Now Moses himself, I don't think he was very charismatic himself. I think his brother Aaron did most of the talking, right? But it was such a powerful story about the promised land. And so charisma is about getting your audience to come alive.
Yeah. And I just think there's some people that you see, there's certain leaders, even if you look at certain former presidents, they seem to have like this it factor, right? When they're standing up there, you just look at them and be like, okay, yeah, everything's going to be okay. They just have this charisma.
Yeah, there's safety involved in that. You feel safe in their presence. You feel energized in their presence. You see a future in their presence. You believe yourself in their presence. It's those kinds of things that happen. And when charisma, when you see charisma, and charisma when you feel charisma. So you got to see it and feel it at the same time. And when those things are present, you come alive in that process.
Do you feel like, so that's something that you feel that can be developed, that charisma?
My promise is that I can make anybody more charismatic. I don't know if you're going to have the power of a Tony Robbins on stage, or a Bill Clinton or a Barack Obama on stage, whether you can have that kind of power. But I can definitely make you more charismatic than when you came to me for that very first time. How do I do this? By getting you to build, develop, create powerful stories to tell. Then I'm going to show you techniques to tell it. Pause here, enunciate there, right? Put in a personal anecdote. Use gestures. Okay, I do a lot of podcasts like this. I do a lot of Zoom coaching. I just got off a call with my company. We had probably about 30, 35 Shopify merchants from all over the world, France, Italy, UK, all this kind of stuff. And one of my lines is this, and this is what I do. What was my line, right? The spell is cast when you see yourself in the stories they tell. And the way I do it, now, where's my hand? Now, so can you see my hand over here? Can you see my hand?
No, we can't see your hand. Now we can see your hand.
Now you can see the hand, right? All right. And the way I do is this. The spell is cast when they see themselves in the stories you tell. Okay. And so a brilliant, a great, a succinct strategic narrative is casts a spell. It mesmerizes. It creates a state of absolute awe and riveted attention to the story you're telling. So the spell is cast, just like that, when they see themselves in the stories you tell. And so the action is just as important as the way I paused and the way I intonated and all that kind of stuff. Body language is very important.
Wow, the spell is cast when people can see themselves.
When they see themselves in the stories you tell. That's a Kurian Matthew Tharakan original.
There you go. Yeah, that's powerful. We need to get to that level where people are visualizing themselves in your story. I think it just makes everything else that much easier.
Yeah, it really is. And it's when I was a kid. I love nothing better during November and December than going through the Sears catalog to the toy section. Right. And it's just a little ad for a pair of walkie-talkies or whatever it is, but I can see myself using those walkie-talkies. Right? And I keep coming back to this little section about the walkie-talkies or whatever else, the chemistry set or whatever it is. And you create the stories in your head. So that little ad in the Sears catalog, Christmas edition, was able to cast a spell.
Nice. All right. So we are at the final segment of the show. It's called Write This Down. And this is where we each go around and we give at least one insight from today's show that our entrepreneur followers need to write down so they can level up. And so, Kurian, you're the guest of honor. We will start with you. What do people need to write down?
Most people, most entrepreneurs can tell me what they're selling, but they have much more difficulty in telling me why their customers are buying. Yet that's where all the power lies, all the leverage, all the juice lies in understanding the motives that people have to satisfy when they buy your product and service. Your products and services are simply the tools to enable the promise in the stories that they tell themselves.
So people know what they're buying, but they struggle to know why the customers are buying.
Exactly.
So we need to really get clear on why the customer is really buying.
On the motive.
There you go. Fantastic. Ted?
I think I'm going to touch on that a little bit too, because I think it's all about communication, and it's about listening, right? You got to listen to the customer, what they're saying and what they're not saying as well, right? And be able to read in between the lines. I think I always tell people, if you do most of the talking, you're going to know only what you went in there with, versus getting in there and knowing how to, get that customer engaged to be able to kind of tell you, what they're dealing with, what their pain points are, kind of how they, what's driving them to, to buy. And I think once you have the, that ability, I think the best communicators are some of the best at selling. You can work on those communication skills, and it's not why you want to buy, why you think they should buy it. It's really trying to really, get an understanding of why, they should buy this.
Yeah, if communication skills are key, how do you communicate what you're offering? If you communicate it in such a compelling way that they really get that. So now, great point. So my write this down, it has to do with an experience I had. I remember I was at a conference several years ago. At a conference, you have all these speakers, right? And so for most speakers, everybody's getting up, going to the bathroom. You look around. What I'd like to do is I like to look around the room. And that's how I can tell how the speaker's doing. I look around the room, see what everybody's doing. So everybody's walking around, going to the bathroom. They're on their smartphone, they're texting. This one speaker came up. And literally, you looked around, you didn't see anybody on their phone. They were just like tuned into him. Nobody's walking around. And after he spoke, everybody made this rush to the restroom. It's like they had to go, but what he was saying was so captivating. They were like, I'm just going to hold it until he finishes.
I'm just going to tap dance at this table. And,
right.
Wow.
That's charisma.
Exactly. That's the takeaway, that you can't underestimate the power of having charisma. And I think that should be a takeaway for the show, that we should be working to develop and improve our charisma, because like Kurian said earlier, it's not just something you have or you don't. That's something that you can develop. So you need to reach out to Kurian and start taking the steps to become more charismatic, where people just stop what they're doing. They put their phone away just to listen to what it is that you're saying.
There you go.
Absolutely. Well, certainly, definitely want to thank Kurian for coming on and sharing all this great information on becoming more charismatic and telling stories and moving people through persuasion. So how can people best contact you to get more information?
Come to my website, StrategyPeak.com. So strategy and then Mountain Peak, it's all one word, StrategyPeak.com. And all my contact details are at the bottom.
StrategyPeak.com. And then if people want to get this great book, The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon.com, all the Amazon.ca.com, Japanese, it's all over the place, right? And you can download the Kindle book for $3.99. It's $3.49 actually. I'm going to save you 50 cents. So it's meant to just get the book out there so that people can understand that these frameworks are very available to you to become more persuasive.
Absolutely. All right. Well, again, thank you, Kurian Tharakan, for sharing everything that you shared. This has been a great episode. I'm going to work on my storytelling.
That is terrific. That is terrific. Thanks for having me on, you guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And for everyone else, don't forget that you can go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and any of those places you consume podcasts and listen to a replay of this episode. This is definitely one you want to rewind and stop and take notes and really can help you to take things to the next level. And that's our time for this week on the 30-Minute Hour podcast. Don't forget to share the show.
Share the show. Share the show.
All right.
It's interesting. We have a Facebook user that says, "I need to speak to this man immediately." So you might want to say that one more time, Kurian. He says,
StrategyPeak.com. StrategyPeak.com. All my contact details are at the bottom.
There you go, Facebook user. Get to him. StrategyPeak.com.
Check them out. All right. That's our show for this week. And until next time, have a great one.
Take care.